Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Whenever you may be watching this, welcome back to another installment of our PUPIL interviews. PUPIL is promoting unity through public interest law, and this is the second of our interview series to talk with prominent public interest lawyers in the greater Springfield community to find out where they came from, how they got to where they are now, and how their stories can inspire young people to learn more about public interest law and how they can impact their community by seeing how others who were once in similar positions as they are in now, how they achieve success, and to demystify that process and help people understand how they can take ownership and have an impact in their community in so many different ways in the field of public interest law. So I'm always going to start these interviews by reminding everyone, just reading the PUPIL mission statement. And that is as follows. The PUPIL network will encourage and facilitate the pursuit of careers in public interest law by Sangamon County high school and college students to promote unity, diversity, and community engagement. We will accomplish these objectives through collaborative educational opportunities, networking, mentorship, and other initiatives. And I am truly honored to have our guest tonight, retired Judge Esteban Sanchez, who retired as an Associate Circuit Judge in Sangamon County in the 7th Circuit after a long and distinguished career, not only of service in the judicial branch of our government, but also as both a prosecutor, a defense attorney, and private practice attorney. So really someone that the breadth of his experience checks all the boxes in terms of what a lawyer could do with their career, and service to the community outside of his professional service is truly impressive as well. And I'll do my very best to give a short but undoubtedly inadequate introduction of Judge Sanchez. So Judge Sanchez was born in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and made his way to the United States and went to St. Louis University in St. Louis, Missouri, where he got a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science. Later went on to receive his Juris Doctorate degree from the St. Louis University School of Law in 1978. Then went on to be an Assistant State's Attorney in Sangamon County, an Assistant Public Defender in Sangamon County, was in private practice for a time, and then returned to government service as an Assistant United States Attorney for the Central District of Illinois. Later went on to be the chief of the asset forfeiture unit in that office. And then in 2006, he was sworn in as an Associate Circuit Judge in Sangamon County and handled cases throughout the 7th Circuit in really all areas of the law that could come before a judge in Illinois. And his service to the community, not only to the profession, is also broad and very impressive. Very active in the Boy Scouts, also Little Flower Church, and many other service organizations, including, I just wanted to point out, the Spanish American Club of Central Illinois, and the Sacred Heart Griffin High School Parent Network, among other service organizations. Judge Sanchez has also served the judicial profession extensively, serving as a member of the Illinois Judicial College Judicial Education Committee, the Education Conference 2020 Ethics Track Subcommittee, the Supreme Court Committee on Equality, the Supreme Court Committee on Access to Justice, specifically the Language Access Subcommittee, the Special Supreme Court Advisory Committee on Justice and Mental Health Planning. He assisted in authoring the Juvenile Justice Bench Book, which is the handbook for judges to guide them in applying juvenile law in the state of Illinois, and was also a faculty member at New Judges School and for the Judicial Education Conferences, which is essentially the continuing education for judges in Illinois. So with that introduction, I want to welcome Judge Sanchez to the PUPIL interview series and thank him for his time. And I'll start, Judge, by asking you the first of our standard questions in these interviews, which is, how would you define, in your own words, public interest law?
Uh, I think that public interest law, it's a public service, and it's a public service that you, as a lawyer, are able to do many different things in our communities and in the state or nationally to help promote and enforce certain parts of the law that may interest you. And that is not only limited to, for example, prosecution or defense of criminal cases. You could work for an agency in state or national government, for example, that deals with the environment, or that deals with mental health issues, or that deals with safe and safe enforcement of the law. And therefore, it's a service that while you're working as a lawyer and practicing the profession, you are indeed performing a service to the community in which you serve by doing those things that your job requires. It is essential for the function of our government in a democracy like ours that devoted public servants in the law participate in the function of government to ensure that the government functions well, that the government functions effectively, fairly, and that it complies with the law that the legislature has passed and with the constitutions of both of the state and the federal constitution. So it's really a public service. And unlike a volunteer type of public service where you volunteer to go work for the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts or your church or a community association or a need community community need, you are doing a service to help the public have a better government. So that's what how I would describe it. To me, it's just public service involving the law.
That's an excellent answer. And you know, in my capacity as Sangamon County State's Attorney, one of the things that is most inspiring to get up every morning and go to work to do is the thought that no matter what you do during that day, large or small, you have the opportunity to make a positive impact on the community and serving the community. And that I think is reflected by your definition as well. And I definitely share that. So one of the things that I've always admired and been interested in about your personal story is that you came to the United States and went to law school, having not had the benefit of English being your first language. And so I wonder if you could tell a little bit about your personal story and how that experience led you to take the career path that you did.
Sure. I went to high school in Puerto Rico where I grew up, and decided to come to the university in the United States. I had never been outside of Puerto Rico. For those of you who do not know, Puerto Rico is an island in the Caribbean. It's about 1,200 miles from Miami or Florida, 2.5 hour flight from Florida. So it's pretty remote. It is part of the United States, and people born in Puerto Rico are U.S. citizens. Although we are not a state, we have very similar relationships with the United States government. But we are not a state. For example, we cannot vote for president. If you live in Puerto Rico and you're Puerto Rican, you cannot vote for president. But you can come here and vote for presidents, which is kind of interesting. So I came here. I've never been outside of Puerto Rico. I've never been on an airplane before, and came to St. Louis. I had two cousins who had graduated from St. Louis University, so we knew the university, and started to study. So it was a pretty difficult transition. My English was not very good. It's still not very good, as you can see. So you learn and you persevere and you work hard at trying to learn not only the material of your courses, but to learn the culture and to learn about your surroundings and the city, and to learn about people and things of that nature. So I had some good friends that helped me out, and that was how I got through. I always wanted to be a lawyer, so my goal was to complete 4 years of college and then return to Puerto Rico. On my 4th year of college, I met a young woman who was going to school at St. Louis University, who is now my wife and has been my wife since for 40 some years. But so I decided then to stay on to law school so I could be with her, and there you go. That's how it happened.
That's a pretty good reason to stick around.
Yeah, it's worked out pretty good so far.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and Puerto Rico, of course, being a territory of the United States, and I've just always been fascinated by that part of your personal story, and thanks for sharing that. What was it like starting law school? Of course, you had been in St. Louis for your undergraduate, career, but what was the difference that you noticed in terms of the level of rigor or the challenges associated with language issues? Can you talk a little bit about your experience in starting law school, which, as many people who listen to this might anticipate, even for someone who was born with English as their first language, is an extremely challenging process during the first year. So how did you overcome those challenges?
It was very challenging. First, as you know, the Socratic method of teaching, which is what the first-year law school tries to teach first-year law student, which is to be able to be analytical in their approach to a discussion, supported by facts and by law. And it was an adjustment, as you know from your own experience from undergraduate work. In addition to that, I had the issue of the language. While I had been able to get through college, there was a new set of linguistic challenges, new words, new phrases, new everything that I had to learn and to use it appropriately. Luckily, again, I have friends who helped me out, and I watched people, how they approached the same problems, and learned from them. And I remember when in my undergrad years, I used to watch a lot of TV so that I could learn a little bit. I did it for fun, but it ended up helping me learn. I remember one of my favorite shows is long gone, but it was The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. I learned a lot from him and his guests about not about the law, but
People.
about the culture and people,
Right.
and how he dealt with people and language. I was able to learn a little bit about that. So yeah, it was very challenging, but I always had faith that I could get through it, that if I worked hard enough, that I could get through it, and I did. Much to my professor's surprises.
So after you graduated from law school, who or what inspired you to pursue a career in public interest law as opposed to going right into private practice and taking a different path? Yeah,
in law school, I had done what I assume they still call them clinics. I have done a couple of clinics. One was in mental health, the other one was in I can't even remember, interviewing clients for a public service type. It's called the Missouri Public Interest Group. I think MOPIRG, I think it's the name. So I had done some public law a little bit, just a taste of it doing that. But when I came to Springfield, because my wife is from here, so we decided to come here to live, to start a family. I did not have a job. I did not know anybody in the community that was associated with the law. I was became good friends with Bill Sheehan, who's, as you know, was a lawyer, just retired not too long ago. And he was the only lawyer that I knew, and I knew his father was a lawyer. But I ended up getting hired by the state's attorney's office, which is what everybody recommend. Every lawyer that I talk to in Springfield recommend that I do. Go talk to the state's attorney. Maybe they'll have an opening for you. And it turned out that
it's a great place to work.
Yes. At the time, it was C. Joseph Kavanaugh, which was Justice Pete Kavanaugh's father. And he hired me. Funny story, when he hired me, he told me that I was replacing somebody who was on maternity leave. So I called my wife and told her that I had a job, but I did not know if I was getting paid, because I assumed the salary would go to the person who was on maternity leave, the lawyer that was on maternity leave. 2 weeks later, I had to call her and said, I got a paycheck. So that was good. And it was, I don't think that, it was just barely over $10,000 at the time, 1978, August of 78, yeah. So you talk about inspiration. I tell you, that was a fantastic beginning to a long career. There were some very, very good lawyers. Judge C. Joseph Kavanaugh, the state's attorney, and his first assistant was somebody that you're familiar with, Bill Roberts, who later became the state's attorney. And they were a fantastic group of lawyers in that office who has later all become very prominent, either judges or went on to work in the state government or in private practice and have been very successful. So they were the inspiration to me. People like John Millick, who became a judge, former Judge Stuart Schiffman, former judge, although she had already left, Jeannie Scott. The office still, when I was there, the office still felt her presence. And she was an important component in that office for many years. There were Ed Hunley, John Mikulich, Byron Cutmore, Ron Stone, a number of other very prominent and very successful lawyers and judges. And they were the inspiration to me because they were so committed and worked so hard to make sure that justice prevailed. They were committed to, and it wasn't just a prosecution for the sake of a prosecution. It was a prosecution that needed to happen to bring justice to victims of crime, to bring justice to the community by prosecuting people that did not need to be out in the community until they grew up or learned a lesson. Others never did learn the lesson, and they spent a lot of years in prison. But it was such a committed group of young lawyers that was really an inspiration. I had always been attracted by public service and public interest law, as it's called now. I graduated high school. I was, and then undergrad and law school from Jesuit institutions. And for those of you who do not know what Jesuit is an order of priests, Catholic priests, and their main focus is education, and they're very independent thinkers. And one of their big thing is service to others. Men in service of others is one of their slogans. I think it's my old high school slogan. And so that we have always been, since the 7th grade, I have always had that sense that there's more than servicing yourself, that there has to be service to others in order for you to live a full life. And so I had that. And then when I went to work for the state's attorney's office, I saw it in action, how service to others was an important component in a professional life as a lawyer. And that was my inspiration. And not only was it was the prosecutors, but the devotion of the public defenders, for example, and the defense bar was also an inspiration. And they, they at that time were part-time with their own practices, but these cases took a long time, a lot of their time. And I know because I later became one, as you mentioned, and it was an inspiration. That's my inspiration. The devotion and the commitment to justice that those people had at that time, at both sides of the aisle. And then, of course, the judges were as committed to making sure that the legal system worked correctly and fairly to both sides, and to the defendant and to the victims. And that was the inspiration.
That's extremely well put, and I think particularly for prosecutors, and as you know, one of the ethical rules applicable to prosecutors, I think the original language came out of an old federal case, but has now been codified into the ethical rules about
Berger, right?
Berger.
U.S. versus Berger. Yes.
Exactly. I've got that quote printed out. So the objective being not just to obtain convictions, but to do justice, and I see that, as you said, across the courtroom, the system is filled with people who are striving to do justice. They advocate for different positions, but each in their own way to uphold the Constitution, and in the end, to strive for justice. And you were a part of that for your entire career, and I appreciate that question. Okay, the next question. I love this one. How can young people draw upon their own life experiences to recognize the impact public interest law can have on our community?
I think open their eyes and look around. Every single thing that happens in their lives and that they see in their lives has been impacted by a lawyer doing public work. Even things as simple as their driver's license. Lawyers formulated the policy for issuing driver's license after the legislature passed the legislation allowing driver's license. The purchase of a car. There were lawyers at the Secretary of State and in the legislature that created the processes to do that. When the Salvation Army or Goodwill or any other social organization needs help, lawyers are involved in that. I think lawyers are trained leaders in our community. I think that's what sets us apart from, there are other things that sets us apart, but that is one of the biggest components, because we are trained leaders to help, and the reason for that is so that we can help others maneuver the very complicated part of our society that has to deal with the law. So that's why you see so many lawyers that are volunteering their time or are appointed in social services organizations, contact ministries, Catholic charities, Lutheran services, the parent place, all those organizations in the community, the NAACP, any organization, it needs lawyers to help and guide through all of the very difficult legal schemes and that they have to navigate to be successful, from the reporting for fundraising to the IRS, to filling out the right IRS forms, all of those things lawyers have been involved in. So young people who want to be, who are wondering what does this public interest law thing is much broader than being a prosecutor and a defense attorney in a criminal setting. It's much broader. For example, in our court, we have lawyers that are volunteers to help people who are in court for domestic violence cases that need to have an order of protection either entered or heard by a judge. They have lawyers that volunteer their time to help those people navigate through that, which is a complicated law and a very difficult law, so that they don't feel like they're going at it alone. The same is true, for example, in our mental health court. Not the mental health court that Judge Madonia handles, but the civil mental health commitment court. There are lawyers with the Guardianship and Advocacy Commission that do a fantastic job, and you know, because your lawyers from your office handle those cases that deal with cases where a person is so mentally impaired that needs to be hospitalized involuntarily because they will not do it voluntarily. And that is a very difficult process. And it not only very difficult for the lawyers, but it's very difficult to understand for the patient. And there are lawyers that handle that. And that is a great service that those lawyers provide. And they're overworked and overwhelmed sometimes, but they do a great job at doing that.
That's so true. And I also try to highlight the fact that the type of public interest law that you and I have experience in is litigation in the courtroom. But there are so many other areas that young people may or may not know about that public interest lawyers can have an impact on, areas that they're personally passionate about. For example, you know, housing policy or other issue advocacy, things of that nature that really has really a tremendous impact on laws that are passed. They may not be in the courtroom, but they're affecting the way that law is generated that lawyers who do practice in the courtroom ultimately end up applying. So that's another area to highlight.
Environmental causes.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if you're passionate about conservation, there's all sorts of areas and that deal with environment and the use of our resources, and you know, whether there should be more coal dug from the ground or not, or whether we should have fracking or not fracking. Those are issues that eventually surface in our national discussions, but that discussion and those policies and from both sides are being formulated and assisted by lawyers. And it's very rewarding in any regard. If you're passionate about anything, whether it is, in fact, for example, riding motorcycles, ABATE is a very passionate motorcyclist rights group. They need help with legal issues, and you can help with that. So everything that you see and hear is control. A lawyer has his hands on it.
Right. Do you? I'm curious. Are you the first lawyer in your family, or were there others that came before you that inspired you to pursue a career in law?
I am the first lawyer in my family, and I think no, I have a grandson, not a grandson, a nephew who is a lawyer. But I had an uncle who was a lawyer, and he basically did real estate law. He worked for a law firm that worked for a bank in the real estate mortgages and things of that nature. And then I had also another uncle, and these are uncles by marriage, so they were not related by blood to me. They were by marriage. But I had an uncle who was also a lawyer, and who for years was involved in running the Puerto Rico Industrial Development Agency, which was a political appointment, but he basically helped bring industry to Puerto Rico to help the economy, and he ran that agency, and he also was in private practice. But So those are the only two lawyers that were close to me in my family.
One of the things I think that sometimes is intimidating to young people who don't have any lawyers in their family. Perhaps their only exposure to public interest law could be what they see on television. And that's, of course, not always, or in fact, very seldom reflective of what it's really like to be in the courtroom, as you know. But not having anyone either in your family or perhaps in your circle of people that you interact with that has that real life lived experience of public interest law, or any law for that matter, practicing it. I think it can be intimidating for young people to believe that that they can follow that path. And so, do you have any advice for young people about how that process can be demystified, how they can prepare properly if they want to proceed as a first generation public interest lawyer?
Sure. Well, I always wanted to be a lawyer. I cannot tell you why, but I remember as a very young kid, I'm sure one time I wanted to be a cowboy or a fireman, but ever since I remember, I wanted to be a lawyer, and I wanted to do the kind of work that I was doing, trial lawyer, be in the courtroom, that type of thing. One of the opportunities that exist for young people who are serious about learning more about the law and learning how lawyers work, that is not available, I don't think, to anyone else. For example, a person who may be interested in medicine cannot just walk into a hospital and start watching examinations, or an engineer or an architect, but a lawyer, a person who is interested in the law and seeing how lawyers work, can walk into the courthouse and sit in a courtroom where there's something going on and watch how lawyers work and what they do and how they do it and how they talk to the judge and how the judge talks back to them, and the give and take of the relationship between the lawyer and the client. And it doesn't have to be necessarily a public interest type case, law type case, because it could be, you don't know what courtroom you're going to sit in, but courtrooms are open to the public. Of course, now it's a little bit more difficult because of the pandemic, but courtrooms are open, and you can sit and watch and learn. And I think that is one of the best ways that a person who's interested in becoming a lawyer can learn about the law. I remember I used to do that. Didn't have a car. I was in high school, get in a bus and go to the courthouse and just sit there and watch. I know that's kind of nerdy, but I learned a lot by watching other people talk and interact with the clients and interact with other lawyers, and then you try to kind of keep your ears perked so you could hear a little bit of what the discussions are between lawyers and things like that. And I would bet good money that if a high school student or a college student approaches one of those lawyers and say, a lawyer that they like the way they handle something or was impressed with the presentation, that if that person says, I am a student and I am interested in the law, and I was wondering if I can talk to you sometime, I bet you that lawyer will say, sure, let's go get a cup of coffee, or let's go to lunch, or call me, this is my card, let me write down your name. And I bet you that lawyer will be very happy to talk to that student.
I completely agree. And that's part of the mission of PUPIL, is to try to facilitate those kinds of interactions between, young people who have an interest and folks that are practicing in that world now. And I can say with absolute certainty that any young person watching this who is interested in watching any proceeding at the Sangamon County Courthouse, please feel free to reach out to me at my office, the Sangamon County State's Attorney's Office, and we can make that happen. And I'm certain that there are plenty of other lawyers, whether they be prosecutors or defense attorneys or folks that practice in other areas, that would be more than happy to sit down and answer any questions that you might have. And that includes judges. I think they would be thrilled to have the opportunity to answer questions of a young person interested in the field of public interest law, or any field of law for that matter. So
one of the things that I did in my life was, for about 10 years, I was an adjunct professor of law at the University of Illinois College of Law. And that was exactly the same advice. I taught third-year law students. I taught them trial advocacy and pretrial litigation. And that was exactly the advice that I gave third-year law students. That means that they're ready to get out of law school, to graduate from law school. And I said, if you want to learn about the law and being a lawyer and the process of lawyering, you need to go to the courthouse. You need to watch lawyers work, so that you know how the system works, how it all happens. You know, when you're in law school, it's all theory and very little practical experience. I think law schools are going back to doing more practical experiences, clinics and things of that nature. But it is an excellent way of learning what happens inside a courtroom, and what happens, and how a particular law that you may not have ever heard of is now being litigated in a courtroom, and it may have something to do with like an environment or election law or evictions or whatever. That may not necessarily be a criminal case, but it's just fascinating to see how that happens. And so for somebody who wants to learn about it, that is one way of doing it. And I would recommend spending some time doing that.
I agree. And not only is it an opportunity to learn, but I think it also, you know, it demystifies the process, and talking to someone who's done it helps make things less intimidating. When you see it happening and you talk to someone and it doesn't seem as intimidating as perhaps it might if all you know is, you know, from watching Law and Order and, you know, and drama shows like that.
Which is not accurate to start out with.
Right. Absolutely right.
As much as they try, it's really not accurate.
Right. Yeah. That is so true. Well, Judge, thank you so much for your time. I've learned a lot more than I knew about you before this, so thank you for that. It's really been gratifying to have this time with you. And on behalf of everybody watching and our entire community, I want to say thank you for the time and for your service to our community over decades in the area of public interest law. I know you're enjoying your retirement, and we wish you the very best. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. And anything else I can do, you let me know.
I will. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you. Bye-bye.